In this video, we will see basic object-oriented concepts in Java. So let's start. In this video, we will see what is object-oriented programming, what are classes and objects. Then we will see the naming conventions used in Java. Also, what are the constructors, methods, and instance variables? Also, we will discuss about constructor overloading in Java, and finally, we will conclude it. So, before getting started with classes and objects, we often came across two confusing terms which are quite similar, which are object-oriented programming and object-based programming. So, let us see the difference between the two. An object-oriented programming is a methodology which is used to design a program using classes and objects. It consists of some important concepts like data abstraction, polymorphism, encapsulation, inheritance, etc. While the object-based programming is similar to the object-oriented programming, but with a difference that it doesn't support the concept of inheritance. So we can say that an object-oriented programming is more useful than the object-based programming approach. Now, what are the classes and the objects? So, a class is a blueprint or a prototype from which objects can be created. Also, we can consider it as a group of objects having common properties. Now, what is an object? An object is a basic unit of object-oriented programming which represents a real-life entity. An entity can be anything which has a state, a behavior, and an identity. The object in the program can either be a logical entity or a physical entity, which depends according to the programmer's choice. Then came the naming conventions. Naming conventions are nothing but the rules which must be followed as we decide the name of the identifiers in our program. An identifier name can be anything like variable, constant, method name, a class name, or a package name. So, certain rules need to be followed while deciding the names of the identifier. Few of them are: the identifier name must not contain any white space. Also, they should not start with a special character like ampersand, underscore, dollar, etc. It must only be started with the alphabet character. Also, we can use a single special character which is underscore in between the identifier name. Also, if a name of an identifier contains multiple words, so they should be separated using the dots. For example, as we can see here, java.util.star is an example of identifier name having multiple words which are separated using the dot operator. Also, it is recommended to use appropriate words for naming the classes instead of using the acronyms. Then comes the method and instance variables. So, a method is a certain block of instruction which are grouped together to perform a specific task. There can be multiple methods in a single program. The most important method in Java programming is the main method. Since when a program is executed, so the control of program first get to the main method, and from the main method it is directed according to the program needs. Now the instance variables are the variables which are used by the objects to store their states. They are defined without the static keyword. Also, they are called so because The values are instance specific and hence it is not shared among the instances, which means that if a class is having multiple instances, so each instance will have their individual copy of the instance variable. Then comes the constructor. So a constructor is similar to the method with its name, similar to a class name. A constructor is called at the time each object is created in a class. Also, the main purpose of the constructor is to allocate the memory for the objects. In Java programming, there are two types of constructors which are default constructor and parameterized constructor. A default constructor is a constructor which is called in a program only if no explicit constructor is defined in the program by the programmer, or we can say that the compiler declares a default constructor if our program is not having any explicit constructor. Then parameterized constructors, these constructors are the explicit constructors declared in the program by the programmer using certain parameters in its declaration. Now let us see the concept of constructor overloading. So constructor overloading is a technique of having more than one constructor with different parameter list. They can be arranged in such a way that each constructor performs a different task. Also, they are differentiated by the compiler using the number of parameters in the list and their data types. Now let us have a practical demonstration of constructor overloading. Here I am using Eclipse for the demonstration purpose. You can use any other platform too. So first I will create a class. I will name the class as student. Now we will declare few instance variables for the student class such as name with string data type, age with an integer data type, then marks having a double data type. Now let us declare a method to show these variables value. So I will declare a method show. First we will display the name. After that we will display the age of the student. And at last we will display the marks of the student. Now we will create a main method so that we can initialize an object for the student class. Here we will declare the student variable using the new keyword. Now we will use these object as to call the show method. Now let us save and run this program. As we can see, the default values for the name, age and marks get printed since the default value for a string data type is null, for an integer data type the default value is 0 and for a double data type the default value is zero point 0. Also, here we have not created any constructor for the student class, so a default constructor gets called here. Now let us declare a constructor for the student class having certain parameters. The name of the constructor must be similar to the class name. Now we will declare some parameters in it, which will be for the name, age and marks. Okay, now we will declare name equals to n, age equals to a, then marks equal to m. Now let us specify the parameters while calling the constructor. The name can be anything like Tom, the age can be 10, marks could be 89.4. Now let's save the program and run it. So here as we can see we have created a constructor for the student class and initialize the value name, age and marks with Tom, 10 and 89.4, and then we have printed the values using the show function. So let's create another constructor for the student class so that we can clearly see the constructor overloading for this class. So I will create a constructor for the student class with a different number of parameters. In this case, we will take only a single parameter and assign it to the name. Now let us create another object for the student class. This time we will name it as S2. I will name it as Roy. Now let us call the show method corresponding to the S2 object also. After executing the program, we can clearly see the difference between the two constructors declared here. The first constructor for the S object have three parameters in it, so it defines the name, age and marks to certain values, while in the second constructor only a single parameter is there, so only the name instance variable can be initialized while the other two variables age and marks get the default value. So in this way we can achieve the constructor overloading in our program using different number of parameters in the declaration. So now let's get back to our slides. So in this video we have seen that the classes are the blueprint or the group of objects having common property in them. Then the objects are the instance of a class or a representation to a real life entity which can be logical or physical. Then the block of codes written to complete a specific task is termed as a method. The instance variables are those which are used to store the object states. Also, constructors are used to allocate the memory for the objects in a class and they are called at the time of object initialization. Also, we have discussed the concept of constructor overloading in Java. This came to the end of our video. So do share the videos with others if you find it helpful. Also stay tuned with us for the other upcoming videos. And at last, thanks for watching.